All right, welcome back, everybody. It's that time. We're doing another tier list, another one. This time we are post-May Melee, going into the June Joust, so it's time to mix up our power rankings. I think we've seen enough from each of the teams to at least move teams up and down based on it. Obviously, this is what I had coming into this season in my earlier power rankings YouTube video going into the season. A lot of things have changed since then. It's been weird to see a lot of ups and downs. I think for the most part, I was pretty on point. But obviously we need to move some things around. First things first, I'm gonna fuck with this because this was just everyone got really upset by this. So this wasn't me. This is just how it was built, and I guess we can get rid of Valiant. Let's get rid of it. Delete row. So we need to change some things around as we start. And we're going to start from the bottom, and we're just going to make our way up on teams that went up, down, based on that. And we're just going to discuss all the teams and the May Melee they had and what we expect from them coming into the June tournament. I'm not really going to talk too much about the meta and how the meta has implications for just this June tournament. I'm not going to be like, hey, maybe Roadhog's meta, so this team will be good. I'm going based off of previous results and just not really looking too much at schedule, meta, all that kind of stuff. Just mentally, where do I think these teams are at? So that just stops us from muddying the waters too much and just having just like a million different things to consider. So let's go from the Valiant. They're obviously coming up from failed management tier. So they were questionable, and they pretty much confirmed everything we thought about them coming into this season. I think the shining lights for them right now are Molan Run and Crystal. Obviously, Crystal is still mechanically very good, and Molan Run was very good on the Tracer. But for the most part, the team's just lacking, right? They're going to stay very heavily in this E tier. I might make another tier and move them down. We'll see. We'll see how we feel as we go, if we need to add another tier, move some things around. But Valiant are pretty comfortably at the bottom, in my opinion. I think we can all agree to that, right? They do have the best friend squad, as you said, Mrs. Edis, but the best friend squad is, at least they have each other because they are not getting wins. It will be curious to see if Valiant will ever get a win in this season. I'm starting to get worried that they won't, because they lost the matchup versus the Charge, right? Am I correct that they played the Charge? Let's have a look at this. Los Angeles Valiant. Just so I can get up their records. So this was their records. So they lost to Chengdu, Philly, Charge, and Seoul. I think if you are being realistic right now of where the APAC region is at, the team that they are most likely to beat is the Charge, and they got 3-0'd by the Charge in this in that matchup. So a little bit worrying. I'm curious to see. The next one is, how good is MYXL, right? Is MYXL going to improve? Because they had a pretty weak weekend. So we'll see. I'll talk about Charge in a little bit. We're just sticking on Valiant. But Valiant, very fairly at the bottom right now. Yeah. So I'm actually going to talk about the Vancouver Titans next, because I think the Vancouver Titans are sort of an interesting one, because you know, everyone expected Vancouver Titans to be the worst team in the North American region. They did okay, if we're being realistic. So they took a map off of Washington, they took a map off of Florida, they took a map off of Toronto. It was fine. They are struggling from the issue that I just don't think they have a lot of high potential players on their lineup, right? Like, obviously, I think when we got to see a lot of these players sort of fire off, like Teru was pretty impressive. I'm excited to see more Teru. He was like one of the shining lights on this team, especially on that May when they were playing it. But everything else, just some questionable decisions, some questionable play, but they're fine. I think we're not looking at Vancouver Titans as a Boston Uprising of last season or the season before that, where they are just very well and truly, or kind of like the LA Valiant in the APAC region of this season, is they're just not very obviously the worst team in the league. I think Vancouver Titans is a team that can beat a lot of middle of the pack teams. If you give them the right meta, you give them the right, it's their day, they're playing well. They're not a team that I just think everyone is expecting to just show up, don't have to think too much about it and beat them. So I think they're okay. But they are still pretty comfortably in the D tier for them right now. It'll be interesting to see who they go up against, because this isn't a super easy schedule. Obviously, Paris was the team that they had to beat, and they couldn't get that done. But this match, I think we all saw this was pretty up and down from both sides. Because I think, why do I feel like that was the first match of the? Oh, that was the first match of that opening weekend. That was the opening match for Paris Eternal. Because I remember Vancouver won the first map, right? And we were very worried about Paris. But Paris ended up rebounding pretty well. So let's talk about Paris then, right? Moving onwards. Paris is my next team on the D tier. They only got one win, and that was over the Vancouver Titans. So they had pretty hard opponents outside of that. They played against the Houston Outlaws, which they actually managed to take a map off of as well. That was a banger of a Havana. Mitch Cat, thank you very much for the 18 months. And they look good when they could play the brawl, but they did announce that they were hoping to get a lot more, versatility in their lineup, and their coaches worked with them to get a lot better over the time. Can we put Paris and Vancouver in the bread tier? Absolutely not. No more tiers. The most important thing to note from Paris Eternal going from the May Melee to the June tournament is got to be Dridro. I don't actually know. I'm just going to call him Dodrio. Coming in. So Neptuno retires from Overwatch League and picks up Dridro. I think Neptuno, he wasn't happy with his performance. I think he definitely did have he was very up and down. He had a lot of really bad first deaths, but he also had a couple of good plays. But he said, pulled out, and Dridro is going to come in. A contenders player, EU contenders player. He's a French player. He's been in EU contenders for, the last few years. So he's been a good player. I'm excited to see some fresh blood. I'm glad that they picked up someone new, some blood, and, it's the best time for them to get in new players. Overall, I was pretty impressed with a lot of these players. I was never impressed with them all in the same game, if you know what I mean. I think they all had up performances and down performances, right? I think Dan had some really good matches, but he also had some really bad matches, right? And then we have Suna, who really stood out to me on Trace, but we didn't see a whole lot of them. Same thing with Onigod and Naga. They had a lot of ups and downs. If they can all hit their ups together, they can get that synergy, and they can all start firing on all cylinders. They actually have a very talented roster. But the problem is they can't make it work. Also, Khan has been the most impressive player for me on this team. Absolutely fucking monster on that flex support. Thoughts on Elivote? I think Elivote had some very, Elivote was sometimes I was like, dude, Elivote's sick. He's still got it. He's going to pump. And then he had some really questionable decisions. I can't remember which matches I was watching when it happened, but there was a couple of things where I was like, Elivote, you good? He had some weird moments, but that just goes back to the idea of the disconnect and team not being on the same, synergy. Also, new team, completely new roster, nerves, all that kind of stuff. So for teams like London Spitfire, Vancouver Titans, Paris Eternal, I'm looking for them to improve throughout the season. I'm not expecting them to just be all of a sudden a mid to top table contender, right? So we'll see as time goes on. Paris Eternal once again went 3-1. I don't think they've justifiably been able to put themselves at a higher level at this point. They're staying down here in the D tier. A team. Then we go on to the London Spitfire, right? London, I think we almost have to say was one of the most overhyped teams coming into this tournament, or just this league season, because everyone was just expecting them to be head and shoulders above your Paris Eternals, your Vancouver Titans, be really good. We didn't get those results from them. Obviously, they are coming from the British Hurricanes, roster, which is very hyped up. They had enormous amounts of success in the Overwatch contenders in the European region. We didn't see that in the Overwatch League. And I think a lot of people are, they see a lot of these Korean teams, Korean players come from contenders and dominating the league, and they were expecting that from this EU counterparts as well. I wasn't that high on it. A lot of people were very upset that I put them in this D tier, but I think deservedly so. They just didn't play to their expectations. I'm sure they're just as disappointed in these results from themselves. some very glaring weaknesses. Obviously, they had a pretty hard schedule. Gladiators Houston in the opening week, but they didn't look that good in either of those matches. And then they took Boston to 5, which was impressive because we were expecting more from Boston, but Boston also didn't deliver. And then Toronto Defiant, which was also quite an impressive team. So let's look at the lineup because I think that's important when we talk about this team. I think we need to talk about Shax, the elephant in the room, right? Or actually just their DPS lineup of Shax and Hybrid. I think Hybrid's getting more flack than he really deserves right now because he obviously didn't have a good start to the May Melee, good tournament. He had some okay moves, but for the most part, underwhelming in the grand scheme of the Overwatch League hit scans. And then we talk about Shax, who I think this is his best meta. He was able to play the Tracer, but he very much did not get the results that we expect from a player of his caliber. He couldn't get any positioning, he couldn't get any space, and he was just losing a lot of 1v1s that we don't usually see him. He didn't have these like Shax moments where he just goes dumb aggressive and just kills everybody as well. So I don't know if that goes back to the support lineup, not giving him that support. You know, the first thing that sticks into your mind is the London Spitfire versus the Houston Outlaws match, right? And we obviously have Kyle saying, good fucking packs. Shax isn't getting that. Everyone is pocketing their traces, putting a lot of resources in their traces to succeed. And I don't know if Shax's positioning is wrong, communication is wrong, all that kind of stuff. It's really hard to break it down individually, but whatever's happening, it's not working. So we're going into the June tournament. Trace is not in the lineup. I don't expect to see a lot of Shax with that out of it, but the point still stands, right? As much as in the short term, it's not a big deal, there is a massive flaw there. They have a tried and true tested Tracer player that they can't enable. There's something going on there. And I think you need to look at the rest of the team when you talk about that as well. I think Huddy and Molfig got better as the melee went on, as they played more games, but their opening weekend was very poor for a tank line that we hyped up a lot of. These guys are going, they're kind of like the Gator and Hawk, right? The European Gator and Hawk, where we had this ridiculous expectations from them coming into the season of they have been so good in contenders, and then they came to the league and they just weren't there. They didn't match up. So I want to see how they keep stepping up and improving as time goes on, but they're not at the level that we were hoping from them. So if they're playing catch-up game just as much as the other teams of Paris Eternal, Vancouver Titans, I would say they're very much in the same boat as those guys, at the same level. So yeah, we'll see. Reaper and Calyx have been okay, but Blase is an interesting one as well. I know a lot of people like to kick Blase too. I think Blase was fine. I don't think he proved that, you know, like, I am the veteran player who's going to lead these people. We didn't see a whole lot of Blase. He's just fine. I haven't seen him pop off yet. We haven't seen the best of Blase yet. But as I said, it goes back to the fact of it feels like they're not working together at the same level and they're not supporting each other as much as they need to. Maybe that goes back to the idea of these guys have been in contenders. You get away with a lot more when you're in contenders. You're all of a sudden in the Overwatch League with the best players in the world. All of a sudden, you going for that flank, or you hiding, or you not expecting to be seen, or you not expecting to take damage. Duels that you would usually win just through mechanic matchup doesn't exist anymore. Maybe that's the big hurdle that they need to get over. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see. As you said, in Reprise we trust. I trust Reprise. I'm excited to see what they're going to do with this team. Sparker, I think they're very much waiting on. I think they're counting down the days until Sparker is eligible to join this roster, which is in June 10th. So less than a month. So I don't think he'll be able to play during the June tournament. How much of the June tournament? It's actually worth looking at. Let's go to the schedule. When is he going to be able to play? June 10th, actually, right here. So he will be able to come in. Actually, this might be just before the cutoff. Yeah, so this might be the last thing. He probably won't be in for the June tournament. Maybe the end days? I don't really know. This is probably playoffs, right? We're entering playoffs here. So he could... If London makes the playoffs, Sparker will come in. We'll see. That's I think that's wishful as a London fan, but who knows, right? You never say never. I think London Spitfire and Paris Eternal are in the exact same boat, as I said, with the Vancouver Titans. Is they actually can beat a lot of teams, and all of these teams took maps off of good teams as well. So it's not like they're out of the realm of possibility of improving or getting much better. They just right now aren't the biggest threats that we have in the league, because the league is heckin' stacked this year. So then we go into the C tier. And I think we start with Boston. Okay, let's talk about Boston. Because Boston was, for a lot of people, a dark horse team of this is a team that actually has slowly been improving and making a lot of additions that could make them very, very good. We didn't see that. We didn't see that at all, right? So the biggest issue that I think that they had is they just didn't look like they were on the same page. They may be nervous. They did have a very hard schedule, except for the one win that they got. So they played up here against the Gladiators, Dallas, and Washington. So we'll give them a little bit of wiggle room on, you know, jumping the gun on whether or not they're good. But they did beat London, a team that they should be expected to beat, given where both of these teams stand. But it went to 5, very close series. There is the rumors of Laurie overworking their players coming into the opening of the league. In the opening weekend, they were just dead tired. Who knows? Maybe they learned from that. Maybe they adjusted from that. Big news as well is that Fusion's Engebushi are in North America now, as far as I'm aware. Am I right about that, chat? Someone confirm / deny. They're either in North America or they got their visas approved. I think they're in North America. So that's big for them. The question becomes, how much Punk are we going to see? I actually think Punk had a rough opening weekend, but I think he was quite good for the team. I think he was probably one of the most consistent players towards the end of the series, and one is integral in their win against London. Or are we going to see them go to the full Korean lineup? Obviously, we didn't see any of Color Hex. We didn't see any of, you know, obviously Fusions wasn't in North America, but it seems like they're heavily leaning towards their Korean lineup. Are we going to see Penis Fish come into this lineup and sort of bench Punk? Because, you know, obviously Laurie's the head coach, Korean lineup, they might be leaning onto that. We'll see. So far, the Korean lineup hasn't been super impressive. I think Faith and Valentine both had pretty poor rookie openings to the league. Valentine wasn't able to play much. I think it was his Doomfist impressed me, but you know, his Tracer, which was required from him, was heavily lacking. Obviously not 100% his fault. He wasn't expected to be the person playing that role. With Soon, obviously, you know, not being able to play for the team, he sort of got thrusted into that role. But yeah, Valentine, I think, struggled. So did Faith. I think Faith had a lot of really questionable decisions, a lot of questionable positioning. Just neither of them played that well. We have high expectations for them. I'm not, you know, selling my stocks in them right now, but this isn't the powerhouse that we were hoping we were going to be. Myeonbong is obviously still cracked, but IM37 inconsistent right now as well. And especially in the opening weekend, goes back to he just wasn't hitting the standard that he needs to be on a hit scan. So they are staying in the C tier. I don't want to talk about this team too much because I think there's a lot of question marks still to be answered about them for the June tournament. But they're staying in C tier. They haven't done anything that makes me think that they should be above here, so they stay here. Moving on to somebody who shouldn't be in this tier anymore is the Houston Outlaws. The Houston Outlaws, holy shit. I don't even know how high I want to put them. Let's just put them here, and then I'll clickbait that title on my YouTube and just be like, oh my god, Houston Outlaws, and then all the Houston Outlaws fans will flock to the video. Maybe we could do that. But they were very, very good. And the thing is, it doesn't even feel like it was a one and done kind of scenario, because they looked improved across the board. It didn't feel like this is the perfect meta for them. It didn't feel like they one-tricked one thing. It wasn't like they had an easy schedule. They were just very fucking good at a lot of things. So I'm just going to look for them rather than type it in. So let's have a look at their matches. They went 3-2 against Dallas and San Francisco Shock in the opening weekend. So these are two, like, Dallas obviously ended up being, this was a week in Dallas before they really hit their stride. But they beat the San Francisco Shock, and then they took down London and Paris. So opening weekend, great opening weekend, and then did what they had to do in their second weekend, and then was a fatality in the long line of Dallas just murdering everybody in the May Melee playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see how good this team really is, and I think you have to look at the back of a lot of the players that they picked up. Jake going into this Brig role and sort of filling in for Juby, he looks very good on it. So when they do have to play that Brig Anna, then they look really good. So Jake, that's where Jake's sitting in. Juby looked very impressive to me on the Lucio. Honestly, watching him play more, watching him look back, he was actually very, very solid. He deserved to be on this team. He wasn't a weak link. He was getting things done. He wasn't playing passive. I actually really like Juby on that main support. So do want to see more from him. And then Crimslow, if you're talking about the support line, talk about a glow up from Dallas Fuel. Fucking took off the training weights from Dallas Fuel, and he's just been making an argument that he is one of the best, flex supports that we have in the league. He was so dominant on Anna, on Zen. Very impressive play from him. So I'm excited to see more from him. Obviously been in NA for a very long time. But the big conversation is Piggy and Django, who just had a monstrous opening season. These guys are very early in the conversations Rookie of the Years. Django took it to the best main tanks that we have in the league in Super, Smurf, and Fearless, and he showed that he could outplay them on a lot of different things. So big props to him, and Piggy's just silently been fucking in the background while Django's doing it in the front line. So I love to see it. You love to see it. And, obviously Dante, Hydration, Happy, they just, at KSF, so I was like, who am I missing? They've been so versatile in what they've said, and I love the way that they're subbing players in. It makes sense. Dante had a bowls issue in the middle of the May Melee, and they adjusted and they dealt with it, and they showed the depth that they have on the bench. KSF, showing why he is on this roster, but Dante just looked in top form when we did get to see him play. So I love to see it. You love to see it. This team looks not only just individually mechanically, the way that they play the game as a team and as a unit, that is what you need to be excited about. They look like they're playing like a top tier team. They're not just overperforming in these individual matches. So, yeah. So big ups by the Houston Outlaws. I was just fucking with you guys. I'm not going to put them in S tier. I'm going to put the Houston Outlaws in A tier. I think they very much deserve to be here, but I don't think until they show me more consistency and that they can do it, with the big boys for over long periods of time, they have to go to the A tier. God damn it. Yeah, no, come on, Liz. You had to be realistic expectations over here. Come on. I'm putting him in an S tier. What are we doing here? Custa hates Houston. Clip it and ship it. Get him out of here. Put them above S tier. Only 4 games. It's hard. Hey, yeah, they went from C tier to A tier. Okay, let's just calm it down a little bit. Okay, guys, let's just calm it down. Okay, I did call Houston Outlaws as my dark horse team, and I think they did a great job. So I think they really proved that. So, let's go on to the B tier. Now we need to start moving some teams up, down, and around. NYXL, let's start on this side. This is a team that I originally had in the C tier. I should stop listening to you guys. Maybe you guys are the problem. I'm talking to you, chat, and I'm talking to you, YouTube comments. Everyone was like, oh my god, Custa's underrating the NYXL. This is ridiculous. So I took your word for it. I watched the open scrim, they looked okay. And I was like, you know what? Maybe they're right. Going down to the C tier. Underperformed to expectations for a lot of rookies coming in. A lot of questions have been raised about how good are these players. Still haven't really seen Guangzhou play, which kind of raises a couple of questions. Why is he not playing? Are the NYXL coaching the same that we've always had them, where they have good players? Like, let's talk about it. A lot of their the tank line from the NYXL last season goes over to Philadelphia Fusion, and they be pounding. So what is going on here? I don't really know. I have a lot of questions on why is NYXL. How is NYXL underperforming so much? I think that DPS were okay. I think Flora's really making a good name for himself as well on the back of Ivy. Feather, we haven't seen as much either, but wasn't super impressive when we did see him play the game. So I think Flora and Ivy is interesting. The big question mark for me lines up with the tank line of the NYXL. I think Yakpung and Bianca did not have a very good opening weekend and tournament. So let me have a look at this. So this was what their schedule was. They got 3-0'd by the Chengdu Hunters, 3-0'd by Seoul, and 3-0'd by Shanghai Dragons. So that's where a lot of the concern raises. It's not even like they're playing somewhat close to them. They beat the Spark, but this was the opening weekend Spark as well before they decided to let Shy fuck. And Spark just looked really lost. They just did not look very good at all. So they had that massive coaching overhaul after this weekend, and they looked a lot better. So NYXL capitalized off of that success, but still, other than that, just not really super interesting for us. For NYXL, I don't have a ton to say about them. As I said, they're a pretty dark horse team that we don't get to hear a lot out of, but I have more questions than answers after seeing this, their opening 4 weekend games, and they deserve to go down. If they can't beat a lot of these other teams, then they need to keep moving down the lineup. NYXL, in my opinion, is like potentially equivalent to the Guangzhou Charge, and that's just above the LA Valiant. D tier for NYXL? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They are not that bad. They still have a lot of potential to grow. They have a massive rookie roster, but we hyped them up coming into this season, and they didn't perform. So down they go. So now we need to move on to the next team from the APAC region, as Sly Raiders is just talking about. I don't know what's happening at the Spark, but I'm also going to move the Spark down. Just through making it balanced, but also just, I don't know what is happening there. Like, opening weekend happens, and they fire two of their coaches, and then promote someone to become an interim head coach. They were playing Takoyaki in the opening weekend instead of Gushwei. They were playing Brawl, and that, if you haven't seen my video of watching Spark play Brawl, go back and watch it, and then tell me that they deserve to be higher, if that's what you think, because they looked lost. Legitimately lost. I've never seen players that I respected so much just perform on such a poor level. And obviously they made drastic improvements once they lost their coaches. They started playing Gushwei 100% of the time. Shy came in and just absolutely pounded. But if they have to lean on Shy every single game, it's not going to work in the long term, right? So let's look at the Hangzhou Spark. So Spark lost to Philly, lost to Shanghai Dragons, and lost to New York Excelsior. Obviously, this opening weekend is what we just talked about, where there was some weird roster decisions. We were seeing players play that we weren't expecting to see play. The synergy was awful. Their take on the meta was bad. They put in Shy, and they took Shanghai Dragons to 5. But a lot of that is on the back of Shy, which is great, but I haven't seen that consistency from them. That is why they're staying in the C tier. I think this is the team that is most likely to move up, coming out of this June tournament. But until I see some more from them, I'm not going to be happy with that. You can't just change both your coaches in the middle of a tournament cycle and not expect to get moved down. So, especially with some of the bad results. They obviously completely beat down the Guangzhou Charge as well. That's just Shy doing Shy things. We went back and watched that VOD. It was pretty nutty, but it becomes the question of how good is this roster, right? So Liege has said that he's taking personal time. That is why we're not seeing him played. I think Liege would put this team once again up to the next level, kind of how Shy did. But without seeing Liege in this roster, it raises a lot of questions of how the cross-region compatibility is working, especially with the old coaches, because that is they were playing a lot of these really interesting mix of the opening weekend. They only played Gushwei as the only Chinese player, and even then they put Takoyaki in at certain times to just play a 6-man Korean roster, which looking at that is kind of ridiculous, seeing as a lot of their best talent, in my opinion, is Chinese. Is that going to be a continuous problem? Maybe the new coaching structure comes in that is going to solve that. And this is sort of why I'm still very bullish on them, is a lot of this success of against Shanghai Dragons, against Guangzhou Charge, was on the back of individual, just sick mechanical play that does not cover, like, it's just like kind of covering up a lot of the issues of the coordination just isn't there and the synergy isn't there yet. So we'll see. We'll see. And that's why they're in C tier. That's why they're moving down. You can't have that many bad matches. As much as they did look good towards the back half of the May Melee, that doesn't cover up everything else. So we'll see. I'd love to see some Colders too. They have a lot of great pieces there, right? So they have Jimmy S tier, a different person, different team. I'm going to skip over the Chengdu Hunters right now because we're going to talk about the Guangzhou Charge, another team that has to drop down. And this is the theme that has been the most interesting for the Overwatch League for a long time, is that the East region is not stronger than the West region, in my opinion. We have 4 teams in C to D tier. And, like, as people are saying, you could put Charge here. Should I put Charge here? It does seem kind of insulting to these two teams to... Yeah, you're right. I'm going to put them down to D tier. I think you're right. I don't think they deserve to be in C tier. That was potentially one of the most abysmal performances we've seen from a team that has pretty good players. Because, like, let's have a look at them. They have a lot of great players. Like, they got Rio, they got Krong, they have Eileen, they have Kariv. These are 4 players that I have a lot of respect for, and a lot of people have a lot of respect for. But somewhere along the line, something done fucked up. Because it's kind of confusing. They got 3-0'd by Dragons, they got 3-0'd by Seoul, they got 3-0'd by Spark. These 3-0s weren't close. The one against Seoul was somewhat close. Actually, even the one against Shanghai, but that was maybe I'm thinking the one against Shanghai. Maybe it's just that one. But even then, that was when Shanghai was doing some weird shit as well. They obviously 3-0'd Valiant, but who hasn't at this point? But yeah, something... They weren't playing Eileen in the opening weekend. Probably the best player on this team, maybe under Krong. Kaylee looks lost when we see Kaylee play. We talked a lot about Kaylee coming into the season, and we're like, hey, Kaylee, good mechanics. Are they Oh, I haven't been recording? Why not? Well, the quality's going to be shit for this because I'm going to have to rip it. Let's start recording. Sorry. I'll just have to rip it off Twitch. Well, Sag. Hello, YouTube. I've lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? So yeah, Eileen is their best player, and Kaylee really underperformed. Once we saw Eileen come in, I think they did look more consistent, a little bit better. We haven't seen as much Jihun coming in to play the Wrecking Ball, and we just sort of relied on Rio. Choice of One really impressed me as we kept going. Mandu did not. If you go back and watch that video, Mandu's Brig has a lot left to be desired. Hoping to see some rapid improvement there because it was some pretty basic fundamental Brig things that were being overlooked. But just, I don't think any of these players are performing at that level. Krong and Kariv, even though I respect Kariv a lot, and we respect Krong a lot, I don't think we saw great performance out of them, but that's just being on a hard team. So I think this isn't fair to put, I think this is fair to put Guangzhou Charge in the D tier. They've just really, it's been a disappointing season for them so far, and I'm curious to see how they adjust and how they adapt moving forward because, you know, we talk about MYXL, we talk about Spark, how they've had like massive failures, but they've started integrating some other players, making some big changes. We haven't really seen that from the Charge yet, and maybe we'll see that going into the June tournament, but yeah, Charge is just, I don't even want to talk about the Charge too much. It's just been a disappointing season. I don't want to just like kick them while they're down, but yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see London, Paris, or Vancouver go up against Charge at this point because obviously I think Valiant is an anomaly and I think they're way worse than everyone else. But where do they stack up against these teams? I don't know. And that's a sad reality. If you talk to me and you said that the Guangzhou Charge and the Valiant might be the two worst teams back in like 2020, like as after we finished the season 2020, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. Why don't you organize tiers in order? What do you mean? Fuck off. We're adapting my current tier list so that you can see the movements happen. Hello? Makes sense. Alright. Oh God. What do I do here? We are alright. Let's I'm skipping over Chengdu and Toronto for right now. I'm gonna put the Atlanta Reign down to C tier. No, I don't think Seoul are better. Do not look at this list and be like, oh, Boston is here and Atlanta is here, so that I think Boston is better. No, this is a tier. I'm not doing individual team, blah, 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 blah. That's a good clarification. I don't think these teams are better and that they, like, where they are on the tier does not matter. Okay? Just keep that in mind. This is literally just a tier list of they are equivalent. There are too many factors that go on outside of it. We have strength of schedule. We have metas. We have all the constant moving shit. The fact that we haven't seen a lot of these teams play a lot of games, I'm not going to put individual teams over each other because it's usually negligible and it's usually just a dumb biased opinion if people are doing that. So don't think about that. Let me talk about Atlanta Reign though. I'm putting Atlanta Reign down to C tier for pretty much obvious reasons. I think at this point, right, they have really struggled, in my opinion, to just perform to the level that we're hoping from them. They did have some tough matches, but they looked really good in this matchup against the San Francisco Shock. This map 5, obviously, we have to raise the questions of how good is the San Francisco Shock right now, but that is going to come later in this video. The Atlanta Reign, in my opinion, are just... Maybe it's just we're biased off of the opening weekend of we had such a really high level analysis of an expectation for the Atlanta Reign that they just didn't live up to. The reason we were so hyped on Atlanta Reign coming into the season is we're going to play Brawl. We didn't play Brawl is the answer, and that caught Atlanta Reign off guard as well. They have since added Coach Hunter, who seems to be, you know, I got to talk to Masara actually in a recent video that I did for Overwatch League, and he said Hunter's coming in, having some changes, implementing some changes that we're not really used to in the Atlanta Reign. So hopefully he's giving a little bit more structure to the team, and they'll be able to have some more versatility because they just didn't have any adaptability. They got reverse swept by Toronto here just because Toronto just realized they could just play Winston double bubble everywhere, and Atlanta didn't have an answer to it. That's pretty disappointing. So as much as I think Atlanta did look, they 3-0'd Paris Eternal. They looked good doing it. They took San Francisco to 5. They were another team that got a lot better as the tournament structure went on. I think they deserve to be in the C tier, especially with how top heavy this league is right now. I think it is worth noting we were in a meta where I don't think we could see the deep. I think that we can all agree that the DPS lineup for the Atlanta Reign is the shining spot for this team. Kai Pelican Edison is really good and crosses pretty much every box. The biggest issue that I think that they ran into was they just didn't look like they were prepared on how to utilize it. Pelican's May looked good, but then like Pelican got forced onto Tracer on a couple of maps, and his Tracer was kind of underwhelming. So it's like you'd want to see Edison. They just didn't really look like they had a good grasp on the meta, and I don't think any of them played particularly well in this, but could be a result of the whole teams. I don't even want to talk about all these players individually. I do want, Iris I think impressed me a lot, but other than that, I just want to see different looks. I want to see them come into a tournament more prepared than they did this tournament. We said the coaching staff was going to be an issue. They've made changes. Hunter's coming in. Hopefully that builds on them from C tier, but they have to be here for now, in my opinion. Pelicans may fucks. I think Pelican's gonna fuck in general. And I don't think we got to see the best of him or the entire team yet. But as I said, I'm holding them accountable for the terrible May melee they had, and that's why they're in the C tier. This is another team like the Spark where I expect them to climb at least a B tier as time goes on. I'm still an Atlanta fan in terms of expecting them to do well, but you need to be realistic. All right, making it down the list. Dallasville should be an S tier. We're making it from the bottom up, guys. We're adjusting from the bottom up. If you are just joined in or you just clicking through this thing, we're slowly making the movements and the adjustments. Don't look at the top half yet. Calm down. All right, let's talk about the Chengdu Hunters. Because this is a team that I think performed incredibly well. I think you need to put them in A tier. But that doesn't mean I'm not concerned about Chengdu Hunters. So they definitely go on to A tier. I think they just completely deserve to be here. Yeah, A tier is so heavy, and that's where I'm gonna have to make some choices at some point. But we're gonna talk about each team, and then we'll find out where we end up at the thing. So Chengdu Hunters are. This is the regular season matches. They 3-1 Valiant. They 3-0'd Shanghai Dragons, which was an awesome opening weekend. That's why everyone was so high on the Hunters. They looked really good with their Farah comps. They looked really good when they had Gaga playing this Winston. They've shown some adaptability, putting in some other players like Faraway 1987. Pretty impressive on that Zenyatta. Definitely fucks, but Monk is crazy on the Ana. Gaga is Rookie of the Year nominee right now, just with how good he's been on the main tank, really proving it and taking it to other main tanks. I think this is the black spot for me from the Hunters. They really threw by not adapting in the matches. And it really worried me because they just like played Farah and just lost. Philly knew how to beat it and they just weren't willing to, change on the fly. They also had some very weird, even in the playoffs, they had some weird choices. Like they full held the Dallas Fuel in their match on Blizzard World, and they played Gaga on, they played, they had like this really good full hold, and then the next day when they played against Florida, they didn't play that. They like put in Among to play the Wrecking Ball. It doesn't feel like they have consistency with how they're doing strategies. Maybe they're giga-braining it, and they're being like, hey, against this team, we want to play Among, and that kind of stuff. Maybe they make it more complicated than it needs to be, and that's my worry for Chengdu. So I'm still worried that Chengdu might Chengdu themselves, but they just have so much talent on this roster now. Like, historically, they used to Chengdu themselves, but the issue they had is they just didn't have great, well-rounded talent. But fucking Leave is cracked. Actually cracked. He plays everything at such a high level. Nisha's main support is so good. All their additions have been so good. Jimmy is fine. Let's not open up the Jimmy argument in this video. But Jimmy's doing his job. Jinmu's obviously doing Jinmu things on the Farah, on the Doomfist when he is required. And I think Elsa has made great strides to improve. And he was definitely an asset to this team throughout the entire May Melee. And that's all you can ask for. This team has drastically improved. Mechanically, they're good. If you're not a Chengdu Hunters fan, you should be, because this is a team that is just fun to watch. Where their ceiling is, we don't know. But that's where I'm going to leave the Chengdu Hunters. Stop making Elsa play Sigma. Yeah, and that goes back to it. Their hero choices and their strategies are a little chaotic for my liking still, but as I said, it's just the way the Hunters are. They deserve to be in this A tier, though. I think you can't they can't make it to the playoffs of the May Melee and them not be in there, so. Alright. Toronto Defiant. Toronto is a team that even putting them in B tier, I wasn't super happy with in the preseason. But I think they were pretty good. I think Toronto Defiant really turned a lot of heads and impressed a lot of people for a lot of different pieces. So let's have a look at them. Yeah, I'm not going to move the Toronto Defiant, so in case that wasn't clear. So I'm not going to move Toronto Defiant at all. I think they're going to stay here. So let's have a look at their schedule for what we saw. So they beat Vancouver, they reverse sweeped Atlanta, they beat London, they lost to Washington. And here's something we need to heavily remember when we keep them in the B tier. They had a very easy schedule. Very easy schedule. And every time that they were pushed up against a team that was better than that schedule, they got 3-0'd, and it wasn't particularly pretty. They just couldn't hang with Washington and Florida, but they proved that they were better than these other lower teams. That's why they're staying in the B tier. They could have, I'm worried how versatile they are in the meta. They could have easily got 3-0'd by Atlanta in this series, and it'd be a very different conversation, right? Because they reverse swept on the back of like great individual performances and the way that they played. Defiant are the gatekeeper. I definitely think Defiant are probably the gatekeepers right now. They're like the Atlanta Reign of like they should beat a lot of the bottom tier teams, but I don't see them going any higher than that. I don't think they're gonna beat your better teams as time goes on. I think all of these players have some interesting stories because let's sort of talk about Logix and Beast didn't get a lot of playtime. I don't know how much playtime we're going to see from either of them. We saw Beast come in for one map on Gibraltar. They lost that map. I don't expect to see Beast a whole lot more after that. I just don't know in what world I'd ever want to see Beast play over Sato. Sato's playing very well. I think Beast should stay on the bench, unfortunately. Logix, I think, is a great hit scan and a great player. How much they're going to keep utilizing him, because I think Hisu's been very impressive on this hit scan, right? If anything, we've seen Nice and Hisu sort of covering a lot of Logix's roles. So, and it feels like they're more comfortable playing those. So how much more Logix we're going to see as time goes on? Maybe in a double hit scan meta, we'll see Hisu Logix or something like that. But Hisu's impressed me a lot on this hit scan. I was very critical of his hit scan coming into this season because we saw him struggle on it at certain times. Not a whole lot, but just worried that he can't hang in the long term. But he's been phenomenal. He was one of the shining lights for this Toronto Defiant team. Same thing on the back of Sato. I think Ansun J and Lastro makes up a very good support lineup. And Michelle, I don't know why Seoul Dynasty didn't play Michelle. Michelle seemed very solid. So the team is good. Not great, just good. And that's why they're going to stay in the B tier. They're a team that I think could easily go up or down. I don't know what their schedule's like. They could go up, they could go down. It'll be interesting to see because I want to see them play different metas because we really only saw one look from this team. We didn't see a lot of brawl from them. So I want to see more from them before I go back and sort of really break that down. So then we go into the Florida Mayhem and we start having to ask some really hard-hitting questions of... Because Florida Mayhem, I say Florida Mayhem, we all go, yeah, Florida Mayhem should be an A tier. But what the fuck is this then? Are Toronto Defiant legitimately just going to be the gatekeepers from A to C? It's just Toronto just chilling in the B tier, just like, yo, what's up? Yeah, just chilling out here. So we'll see. We'll see as I go through this list. I think there's a team I do want to move down. I think you guys are hitting it, but we'll see. We'll see as time goes on. But Florida Mayhem pretty much deserve to be in the A tier. I think that's... They had a very good melee. They showed the explosive performance that we were expecting out of them. OG is firing with the team, obviously getting a lot of great synergy. I think BQB and Yaki just are doing BQB and Yaki things. They've shown that they are still dominant in these roles and that they can take it to the best and they can be the best on any given day. They obviously fell short in the melee playoffs, which is unfortunate for them, but I think they had a great run. They lost to Shanghai Dragons twice. Team that I think made drastic improvements, but they were very good. They lost to San Francisco Shock, and I think this is where you saw the weakness of how versatile is the Florida Mayhem. That's really the question. Their brawl, mediocre. It got them a couple of map wins in the playoffs, but that was against East teams that aren't very good at brawl. But are they going to be okay?
Into the ass.
So loud.
I thought the point of a tier list was to have a bell curve. Maybe you need to adjust your perspective and be harsher for the A rating?
No. We'll get there. We'll get there. I think my fear for this Florida Mayhem team is how versatile are they, as they're saying. When OG is not able to play that Winston, Yaki's not able to play like that Tracer, BQB's not able to just play a strict hit scan hero. If you take a couple of those factors out, are they going to be okay? And I don't think we have the answer to that question yet. I don't think that question or that challenge was posed. And we saw Florida Mayhem last season have the exact same issue. Was they were very good when they had that meta. That's when they went so deep in the melee. But every other meta after that, they were good. They just weren't great, right? So that's that's what I question for this team. But as I want to see some Checkmate. I want to see what Checkmate's going to add. I think Slime was very good though. I think he's had a great reintegration into the league, and they're just so talented. They're handsome, they're talented. I'm excited for this team. We have a lot of sample size, so I don't even need to talk about this team too much. I think if you've watched their games, if you've seen the results that they got, there's no argument that they should be in the A tier. They made it deep. They were the third best team in the May Melee, so they deserve to be in the A tier. Definitely not in the S tier until they start shoring up some of those holes, though. Here we go. So now we go over to, we've done Chengdu, we've done Houston Outlaws. We go to the Washington Justice. So Washington's an interesting team because of the results that they had. I'm not going to move Washington. I think they're staying in the A tier. They didn't have bad enough performances that warranted them going down to the B tier, but they definitely don't deserve to be in the A tier. I think we saw throughout the entirety of this May Melee that they have some fucking banger of talents. Mag is very good. Decay was almost underwhelming for the pedestal that we put Decay on. He was probably one of the most disappointing players for this team. I think Jerry was solid. Baby and Closer short up a lot of my concerns with them. They weren't the best support line that we have in the league right now, but they were solid. They were good. Fury is still fucking one of the best off tanks we have in the league. And Assassin is, I think, where a lot of the weaknesses kind of lay at certain times. He was nuts at Doomfist. And when he was able to play those roles, but his May left a lot to be desired when they have to play that brawl, and I think he was one of their big weaknesses. But I think if you can get him on his comfort heroes of his Echoes, his Doomfist, I think he's gonna fuck, and I think he's gonna pound, as well as his Hangzhou, which we know is so good. But May was not it for him. The what's it? Yeah, sorry, I'll message you after this, Johnny. Someone remind me. Yeah, so that sort of becomes the question, right? How good can this team be? They had some disappointing performances at certain times. Obviously, they went 4-0, but they dropped a map to Vancouver. They dropped a map to Boston, both playing Brawl. So they really only looked super strong when they played this Winston double bubble or like this Winston Diva Anna style. I want to see more from them. I want to see some different looks, and hopefully going into this June tournament with the hero pools, we'll see that from them because, as I said, very talented. We saw some great plays by them, exactly what we expected from them. They didn't blow my socks off, though. I think there were people who made arguments for, Washington potentially being one of the best teams in the league. They didn't show that yet. They haven't given me that inspiration. They haven't given me that hype, but their roster's so stacked. I want to see more of them. This is one of the teams that I am very bullish on, and I'm so excited to see more of them. So big plays by them, but they're staying in the A tier. So we're not going to talk too much about them. It's another team. I just want more sample sizes. Los Angeles Gladiators. I don't want to move. Let's talk about them first, okay? We're gonna talk about them first, and then we'll see which side of the fence I land on, okay? So we got the Shock. Then we got the Dallas Fuel. So this was their opening weekend where the Gladiators play. These matches weren't particularly close. 3-1 scoreline, it probably doesn't give it enough justice that they actually did just get pretty hard outplayed by both of these teams. Very disappointing performances from the Gladiators. And the sad thing is we didn't see this bounce back, and they didn't do enough to shore me up because their second weekend they played London and Boston. They looked dominant against both of these teams, but it was Boston and London. Both of these teams had underwhelming May Melees. So how good are the Gladiators? Did they make me feel better on the inside? Because this is the best LA Gladiators iteration we've ever seen. With just the sheer amount of talent, the addition of Shu, the addition of Muse, Moth coming in, who's a tried and true champion, skewed on that Brig. It should be great. We didn't see that performance from them. They should be able to hang with the best. We didn't see that performance from them. I think Shu and Kevster both had very poor opening weekends. Those two in particular. Kevster obviously playing on high ping, but when he was playing this May, just some very questionable decisions. Obviously struggled just a lot. Shu's positioning was, he died in the most random spots ever a couple of times, and we didn't actually see that much Moth. I actually went back and watched all the VODs there on my YouTube. Moth's Lucio was actually very good when he got to play it, but everything else he didn't really play. We saw a lot of Skewed playing that Brig, and we know Skewed is a good Brig, and he was playing fine, but they weren't winning. And then, Space Birdering Mirror, I think we saw, I think they were fine. I don't think they're the people you need to talk about in this. But you need to talk about this team as a whole. Do they deserve to be in the A tier? Should they stay hyped up? So they're saying a lot of things that sound like they should be a B tier team. Yes. But in my heart's heart, I want to keep them here. I really do. I really want to put Gladiators in the A tier. Does that make me a hypocrite for putting Atlanta down and Guangzhou down? It does, right? Stop being a simp. Fine. You win, chat. You happy now? You happy? Bullied? I think it's fair. I'm not doing it just to please people. I put Fletter in fucking S tier on Tracer. Made me look like an idiot, but trust me, I don't conform to anything. You guys just as I said, I'm trying to convince myself, but every time I talk more, it just convinces me more that they should be in the B tier. It's the same things that I talked about with Atlanta Reign, with Guangzhou Charge. Is they had a shit stage. They haven't, until they fix it, they shouldn't be in the A tier. Until I see something from them that they should be in the A tier, they shouldn't be there. So that is why I'm going to put them in the B tier. This is a team that underperformed pretty heavily, and I think they are a team that should be up. They should be up with a lot of these teams. They should be the Mayhems, the Chengdu Hunters, the Houston Outlaws, that. But we haven't seen that. Unfortunately, they had a shit opening weekend against very good teams, and then they beat down, two teams on the bottom half, right? So I'm going to put them in B tier. I think you guys are right. I think they have a lot of potential to improve, and we're expecting that. But it would be such a disappointment. We've had some disappointing Gladiator seasons over the last 2 years, right? 2019, 2020, they've just continuously improved, but they haven't been able to get those results. They've always been good. They've always been here, right? They've always been good. This was the year they were supposed to be the chosen ones, right? They were supposed to drastically improve, kind of like the Houston Outlaws, right? But just kind of on a higher scale. But we haven't seen that from them. They are B+, yeah. And Gladiators are definitely a B+. They are definitely a very solid team, and you shouldn't just be freaking out. But as people said, with the way I've been doing this tier list, it is based on the results and recency bias of these teams. I'm not just looking the players on paper anymore. There's so much recency bias of what happened in the May Melee. That is why they're going in the B tier. Coaching issue. I think we can all agree that if this year doesn't work out, there needs to be a lot of questions asked, right? So we'll see. We'll see. But hey, I believe in this team. I believe in the coaching staff that they can turn it around. So, all right, moving on. Dallas. I think this is the first time we see a team move up to the S+ tier. I think no one can doubt this at all. Dallas are pretty fucking good at the game. They showed that they have a lot of versatility in their players, but also that they don't need to conform to the meta. They won the game without a hit scan player. They literally played Soldier before they played a hit scan. So that just sort of goes to show how hamstring they were. But I think Spark was Tracer, heavily impressed. I think Doha was super good. Fearless is the MVP, leading MVP player right now. Anyone who says otherwise just is biased or didn't pay attention to the games. And I think just across the board, they've been so good. I'm glad that they settled on playing Fielder a lot in the flex support and not just flicking them in from Repel. Because a lot of people forget, but Dallas had a pretty shaky opening weekend. They weren't as dominant as we were hoping they were going to be. They lost to the Washington Justice, right? And they lost to the Houston Outlaws. So they were 2-2 in this tournament before they came. They had some losses to good teams, but they really stepped it up and improved, and they made the meta their own, and they adapted, and they just, on sheer teamwork and sheer power of will, they improved, and they found a way to beat them. Their match against the Shock and the Houston Outlaws sort of showed their growth in the meta and how they're willing to play things and adapt to things and how smart they are about thinking their game. Playing Symmetra Brawl to counter the Brawl style because they don't have that hit scan was so smart. They changed the tempo of the game so that the hit scan is becoming less effective because the Symmetra is just playing too fast. And then we saw in the Winston meta, where they were playing the Winston Ana, they started playing Tracer Echo, Sombra Tracer, Sombra Echo. They played things that shifted the dynamic into their advantage, and they played it to the point that no one was even playing hit scan against them towards the end because it felt like that comp was better. So you need to give them that props that they just broke the mold, and that's what makes Dallas Fuel so great, and that's why everyone should be very high on the Dallas Fuel because they would just they're just insane. And you need to give them that credit. I think they are number one in the world right now. And you can't really doubt that. You are opening the door for Pine. We are not expected to see Pine in the June tournament. I think he's dealing with visas, getting into the country, so we will likely see Dallas Fuel play with the same lineup heading into this June tournament. But then the long-standing question that I don't think we need to answer right now is how is Pine's influence going to be felt on this team? Obviously a very volatile player when he played with NYXL back in 2018, and also been very missing since then. So apparently he was the best candidate for the job. According to interviews with Rush, he is the best person who he trialed with. He has a lot of potential. If they can hone in on that and they can get Pine to play, we all know he's mechanically very good. They can get rid of the triple flanking behind the Watch Point Gibraltar backline and just doing some ridiculous dangerous plays. I think he could be very good for them, but only time will tell. So let's keep going down here. Let's keep going on the list. My favorite thing of doing this list, 100% so far, is seeing people join midway through and then complaining about the tier list without listening to what happened at the start of the tier list and just assuming that a San Francisco Shock are in S tier. It's ridiculous, right? How could we have Shock in S tier? Guys, just calm down. We're adjusting our tier list. We're making it through. If you don't understand, you don't need to freak out yet, okay? So let's calm down and we move further up the list. Let's go to the Seoul Dynasty. Seoul Dynasty, I think, need to go down to B tier. I think we can all agree that Seoul is at that the perfect, most Seoul Dynasty position ever where they can beat the best teams, but they also just look really average the next day. We're heading into potentially a Roadhog meta, so maybe Seoul will be the best team in the June tournament. If we end up in the Roadhog Zaya shit again, and then Prophet's just able to do whatever the fuck he wants, maybe Seoul are the best team in the world. I don't know. That's just the curse of the Seoul Dynasty. So they lost to Philly in the opening weekend, and then they beat Charge, NY Excelsior, and Valiant, right? So that's why it's very easy to be skewed and be brainwashed into thinking they went 3-1. They have a good record. Seoul are good, right? They beat literally the three worst teams in the East. These teams were all incredibly poor. So every time they played against a good team, they played against a Philly, lost 3-1. Played against Chengdu Hunters, lost 3-1. And, you know, Seoul are good. They have a great lineup, right? Like, they have Prophet Fitz. I think a lot of people would argue is one of the best DPS lineups in the game. But, you know, we're still running into that issue of, you know, Anamo, Creative is okay. Gesture to you, Marvel is okay. They have such variable performances on any given day. Makes it really hard to rate them in a certain way. I'm putting them down in the B tier. Honestly, as I said, this team could have a great tournament. This team could have an awful tournament. Until they get some consistency under their belt, I think they safely stay here, especially with how stacked the A squad is, right? I don't think you can put Chengdu Hunters that you can't put Seoul on the same level as the Chengdu Hunters or the Philadelphia Fusion right now. I just don't think that's fair. Or the Shanghai Dragons. I think they need to be that step below them until they prove that they can do that. I think Seoul could beat any of those three teams on a given day, but I don't think they're going to have as good of a record throughout that time as well. So I think I'm going to put them in B tier. They could definitely go up, kind of like the Gladiators, but I think that's I'm happy putting them in there for right now. There just never seems to be a plan when Dynasty play. Dude, Profit doesn't need a plan. Profit just, literally, Profit is, like, their plan is like, step 1, Profit tries to do things. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, Profit. That's literally their plan, hope of the time. The question marks usually is where it goes wrong. Like, there's like, step 2, gesture feeds. And then that all of a sudden they skip step 3, step 4, lose a regular season game to a bad team. That's like their like, they actually don't need like a steps. They need a flow chart of just like people feeding and just doing dumb shit. Because they look so tight knit and so coordinated in one game, and then the next game I just don't even know where they are. Like, and that's always been Seoul Dynasty. That's not new. That's not a new thing from them. So we'll see where they end up. As I said, it's really hard to place them because we haven't seen a lot of them. They played against a lot of easy teams. They're always going to beat, I think, weaker teams because Profit and Fitz just light the world on fire. But in situations where they get matched up against, right, against Philly, when they're playing against, you know, their Carpes and their Rascals, or they're going up against Chengdu when they play against their Leaves, their Jimmies, and their Jinmus, that's where they start to falter a little bit when their DPS can't take over the game. So we'll see. We'll see. As I said, if we end up in a fucking Roadhog meta and Jester just starts slanging his big old Roadhog chat energy around the maps, they could easily be the best team in the league right now. If that's where we end up, because Roadhog main tank becomes a thing. We've seen him do it in the past, and we saw them do it in the playoffs, so we'll see. Is it a coaching issue? Maybe. We don't know. Their coaching staff is like an anomaly for me. Obviously, they've been around for a long time. Maybe that's due to their variable success. How much influence does the coaching have on that team? We don't know. Let's keep moving. Philadelphia Fusion. And I think Philadelphia Fusion stay pretty solidly in A tier. We recently had it announced that Toby and Hopper would be permanent additions to the Philadelphia Fusion. I'm not putting Philly in S tier. I think it's hard to put them in the S tier right now. S tier is like really reserved for, in my opinion, the best teams. I think they are on the cusp of S tier. I think they are very, very close. But the fact that they didn't qualify for the May Melee just sort of keeps me a little bit reserved for them, right? They're this close to the Shanghai Dragons, right? And I think they've performed at a level that I don't think everyone was expecting, especially with the additions that they made. They beat Seoul, they beat Valiant, they beat Spark, they beat Chengdu. They were all very good. The only reason they weren't there was because they lost in map 6 to the Shanghai Dragons, right? So you can make an argument that they should be in S tier, but their roster's just in such heavy flux that I don't really like doing that. I think Carpe and Rascal, insane. Mano, Hopper, just they're playing on as one of the best tank lines that we have. And then I think Toby has just been super impressive to me. You know, as someone who has a command about talking shit about Toby, Toby's been so good. And then Alarm's just Alarm. You know, no one's ever doubted that. So they do look like a new and improved, retooled roster with their additions. They are very, very good. We haven't seen them hit that peak yet. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the long term when Funny Astro and Poco become available to play. I think I would still play Funny Astro over Toby. Doesn't matter how good Toby's playing. I think Funny Astro, at least on the Lucio, like maybe Toby could come in and play the Brig Mercy, and that could be where we end up if Funny Astro hasn't really made drastic improvements on those heroes. Maybe I could see that happening. But Poco, Hopper's been playing so well that it's like, is Poco better than Hopper? I hope that they both get the ability to play for their spot, and it's just not like, hey, Poco's here, he's going to play now, or the other way around of Hopper's been playing well, Poco, sorry, we're not going to give you a run. So that is the questions that the Fusion coaches are going to have to deal with when that problem arises. But I think for right now, they're happy with where they stand. I said if they could just play 500, if they could just keep a good record until, you know, all of their players became available, Shockwave, Funny Astro, Poco, I think if they could hold off, they are doing head and shoulders above that. They are getting good wins. They are winning all the matches, and they are potentially one of the best teams we have in the APAC region because, you know, we're going to talk about the Shanghai Dragons, but they're very shaky for my liking. So Philly just need to get that consistency, and it's disappointing in true Philly fashion. They just didn't make it to the playoffs. So, yeah. So I think Philly's there. I think Philly stays in A tier. I think they're on that cusp, right? They could easily be in the S tier, but I think them not qualifying for the May Melee, losing to the Shanghai Dragons, just sort of leaves that sour taste in my mind that makes me not want to just like knee-jerk put them in the S tier, you know, because of how well they played. Let's do San Francisco Shock first. San Francisco Shock, just like every person who's come into my channel and seen my tier list without understanding that I'm going from the bottom up, the San Francisco Shock shouldn't be in S tier right now. And it's just the reality of the situation. I think they looked vulnerable in their most recent matches, and I don't think you can even counter this if you're a San Francisco Shock fan. Yeah, I know it sucks seeing your team not sitting on the top, but they had some very questionable matches, and they had some struggles. Obviously, they looked good. They beat Gladiators 3-1 in the opening weekend. They looked way better than them. But then they had that crazy series against Houston Outlaws. This isn't even really a massive slight to the San Francisco Shock. This is Houston playing up, but it also shows that the gap is closing between the San Francisco Shock and the rest of the season. Obviously, the Shock have had this happen to them multiple times in multiple seasons where early in the regular season, they do have some losses. They do look a little weak. And then they just come around and pound everyone towards the end of the season. And then the Shock three-peats. That could easily happen again this season. So just calm down. But for that exact reason, I'm not putting them in the S tier. I'm not just going to rely on history to put them in the S tier and just be like, they'll bounce back. They need to prove to me that they're going to bounce back. Obviously had a great match against Florida. They just shut down all the shit that Florida were trying to do. Just literally just took the tempo. But then they had a crazy close series against Atlanta, a team that were not very good in the May Melee. Atlanta really pushing the boundaries of the Shock. And then the Shock just got rolled over 3-0 by Dallas, as did a lot of teams. But yeah, for that reason, Shock just isn't in S tier. And I think you can't really argue too much. Where are the problems rising, right? Why are they not as dominant? And I think you can question a lot of things that the San Francisco Shock did. In hindsight, obviously, during it, we're all super hyped, right? Violet goes over to the McCree and absolutely pounds on that first Gibraltar map that he does that. Everyone got super high on it, but I think that ended up backfiring in the long term. We saw a couple of issues, show up where it's like, all of a sudden we have Glista coming in to play Tracer on Dorado, and just, that was really bad. Why is Glista playing Tracer? We have Striker not coming into the lineup. Striker's so good at Tracer. He's still good at Tracer. We saw him play it. Why is Striker not the one playing it? Violet's forcing the McCree, which is bringing Twilight in. Twilight's sick at Ana, but we're having this switches of who's playing what, where. I think FD God and Nero. FD God definitely struggled in the opening weekends. Just not really finding his footing, not really finding his place. Obviously, he still had some ridiculous mechanical moments, which we all expect from him. But the question that everyone raised when he joined this team is he going to be as tempered as Moth and be as stable as Moth? And he wasn't, right? He wasn't. He had some really bad deaths. He had some really bad moments, things that Shock aren't really used to dealing with. And I think he needs to deal it back. Very, very critical of himself on Twitter publicly. I expect him to be able to deal with it. He has great coaching staff behind him. No one's questioning, is he a good player? He needs to just sort of take that part out of that element out of his game. Then we put, we have Smurf, super sort of bouncing back and forth. Obviously, it was a very different meta of you played Reinhardt on some points, Winston on some. So that we did see a lot of flipping in and out of Super and Smurf. I think both were fine. Same with Choi Hyobin. I think they were fine. I think the questions definitely raised in the DPS category of what is going on. I think Nero looked phenomenal in the May. I think he might have been one of the best Mays we have in the league, but that's all we really saw from him. So what is going to happen out of this, right? Are they going to come into this June tournament, shut the hit scan down? Are we going to see Glister on this hit scan more? The role that he is expected and he was signed to play. Are we just going to see Striker pick up that hit scan role? Are they going to keep trying to force this Violet DPS? We know through history that Violet doesn't like playing Ana, isn't very good at Ana. isn't very good, still probably better than most. Are they going to just play Twilight? Like, you can just bench Violet, right? And play Twilight on the Ana without having to put Violet onto the hit scan. I don't really know what's going on with that. No one really knows what's going on. That's them dealing with that as a team. Obviously, it created some weaknesses, created some holes, and created some problems. I assume they can bounce back from it, and Crusty we trust, but there was definitely some weird shit going on, and it cost them. And hopefully we can learn from that. The big anomaly is definitely the Glister hit scan, though. Why is Glister not playing hit scan? He was very good for the London Spitfire in his rookie season last season. Why isn't he coming in and being that primary player who's playing the Ash, who's playing the McCree? Is it hasn't found the role? Is he not performing up to expectations? Is he not comfortable playing the style? I don't really know. I don't think anyone really knows yet. That's an internal thing. So I'm not caring too much about it. As I said, I trust the San Francisco Shock, but I would like to see more Glister, because at least I could see it with my own two eyeballs that Glister is not performing on the hit scan, so I could understand why these changes are being made. But it feels like he wasn't given that chance, except for when he got to play Tracer, which was just very disappointing. So we'll see. Tayo, I don't really know where Tayo fits in this whole roster. I think Glister striker Nero kind of has everything under wraps. Maybe he could be a Sombra player. I don't really know where Tayo fits in that. We haven't seen that question be answered yet. So we'll see. He played Widow against Houston on Havana. Yeah, like Glister, we know he can play Widow. He played at he played at 1 or 2 maps. We know he can play the Widow. I'm not saying like I'm doubting his Widow ability, but why isn't he playing the McCree, right? That is the question. Usually those roles go hand in hand. When you are the Widow player, you are also the McCree/Ash player, right? So why is that not happening? Maybe keep Biden because he's their shot caller. Maybe. I don't think so. Flex supports are very rarely the main shot callers. So yeah. Thank you very much for money. Carly, thank you for the 100 bits. Cheerleader. I appreciate it. All right. On to the last team. The Shanghai Dragons. And here's what's going to happen. I am the most skeptical on the Shanghai Dragons than anyone. But I'm going to leave them in the S tier. I'm going to leave them there because they have so much gosh darn talent on their lineup. But there's obviously some glaring weaknesses that needed to be solved. But their improvement, their drastic improvement throughout the playoffs is what I'm most impressed by. They got better. They improved. In the regular season, if we just finished the regular season, we're going Mayhem, I might have put them in B tier. If I'm going to be honest, Shanghai did not impress me at all. I had them going out first in the May Melee, in my pick'ems, in the playoffs, because I wasn't impressed with anything I saw from them. Their compositions that they were playing weren't good. Fate was literally feeding his brains out because they were not supporting him because they were playing the wrong compositions. They had some very weird plays. They just weren't coordinated. Fleta wasn't playing up to his potential. And then all of a sudden, we get into the May Melee playoffs, and these guys just fucking came alive. I don't know who you to credit. The players for adapting, the coaches, but they looked so much better. Obviously, they lost this match 3-0 to the Chengdu Hunters, but other than that, they won. But as I said, 3-2 to the Spark, 3-2 to the Fusion. That was map 6. They went to map 6 with the Florida Mayhem. But they just seemed to keep getting better. They had this crazy map 6 against Dallas as well. But then they started to come alive. They did, run out of steam towards the very end in the grand finals against the Dallas Fuel. But I think you credit Dallas for that more than anything. So they had a pretty good run. It wasn't great. It wasn't flawless. And that is where the questions are arising. And that's why I think a lot of people think that maybe Shanghai should be an A tier because of those questions. And let's be honest. We need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Fate. Right? I obviously have a lot of experience with Fate, playing with him as a player. I'm curious to know how much of this is on Fate and just the team not helping him. Because obviously he made a couple of really bad decisions. He has some very questionable things. But you just watch your Fate versus Fearless, and Fate is just getting nowhere near the impact of the value much money as Fearless is getting, right? But also, I think it was less than 50% of the time Izayaki used the nano on Fate as well. Almost 50% of the time they weren't even playing an Ana. They were playing a Zen. So they were playing the Zen Mercy, how does a Zen Mercy help a Winston? They don't have the packs. They don't have the Ana shooting. They don't have the nano. Very hard to get anything done, but that was a major weakness in their play, is that Fate was getting exploited and was getting isolated so often, and something was going awry. Fletter, I also don't think had great performances other than on his Echo. I think he was good. I think his May was pretty solid when we saw it towards the end, but I think his Tracer wasn't that good. Fortunately, Lip is just incredible. Except for EMPing. He still sucks at that. Don't get ahead of yourself. But everything else, Lip is just incredible. We saw them try and implement DM a little bit earlier in the regular season, just like they did last year. Still can't get it to work. For some reason, DM, he is talented, he is skilled, but they cannot get him to work in the lineup. And I don't think they need to. Just keep playing Lip. Lip's hit scan is crazy. It won them so many fights. It literally won them a map on Hanamura against the Florida Mayhem. His Tracer, just out of nowhere, just was one of the better ones that we have in the league. We haven't seen him play it prior to this season, really. Like, he had less than an hour on it prior to this, and he just came out and dominated. So, Lip, his Sombra is also very good. He's just, EMPs are just still awful. But it's good to see. Great signs. I think Lip was the more dominant DPS player for this team over Fletter, who was the 2020 MVP. So, it's impressive to see. Why do you think Ursa isn't playing? Ursa will not play other than to play like the Genji Doomfist, I would say. Those are the roles that he will come in. He is not going to come in to play the Tracer player. He's not going to come in to play hit scan. It's just not his meta. Maybe he could come in and play the May, but I think Fletter actually looks pretty good in it, and I don't think you'd want to bench Fletter for Ursa on the May. So, it'll be interesting. I think there's obviously, they just are so talented. You just look at this roster and it's just so good on paper, and that is why I'm leaving them in the S tier, especially with the growth and the adaptation that they made. But there was definitely some weird shit going on that makes you a little bit uneven, right? Makes you a little uneasy on like how this team is going to do. I think Izayaki was playing incredibly well. I think Lip was playing incredibly well. Void is still just doing Void things and being great. Lee Jae Gon still has tendency to feed a little bit. Needs to take that out of his game if he can, but still just very good at a lot of different things. So, very good signs for the Shanghai Dragons if they can shore up a couple of those things. Lack of depth will hurt them in the long term, and that's the question of, are they going to be okay with depth when they have to start putting in maybe Erster, right? Or, you know, they have to play other things. Is it going to cost them? I don't really know yet. We don't know. And I think that theoretically they should be fine, but I think there's a lot of valid questions raised about that. But yeah, that's why I'm leaving them in the S tier. Will Molly ever be implemented? No, I don't think so, especially with how well Izayaki's playing on the Ana and the Zen. The Molly signing was very interesting to me. I think Molly has a lot of potential to rise as a great flex support in the league. I don't know why he's on this roster. I think maybe they just want to have like the San Francisco Shock route of, we want to have 2 flex supports, so if we end up in an Ana Zen meta, all that kind of stuff. But for someone of Molly's potential, I feel the same way about Twilight, is for someone of their potential, it kind of sucks seeing them ride the bench for most of the season in hope that if a meta ever hits that they could play it, right? So, and we've seen that time and time again with a lot of different players, people who get signed to play behind someone who is just as talented, if not better, but they have to choose one, and then that player rides the pine, and then their career sort of dwindles. Chinese representation, that's kind of a shitty thing. Representation doesn't matter if they don't play. It's my personal belief on everything. It's great to have representation of different, countries and all that kind of stuff, but if they don't play, it doesn't matter. People don't, let's be honest, most people don't care who's on the bench. Most players care who is playing. And that's how that's how you get recognized. So Molly is the new Trill, kind of in a way, yeah, as well, right? So, but that is it. That's the tier list. I think this is where we end at the end of May Melee, going into the June Joust. Do want to give a quick reminder to all the people that joined midway through here and just freaking out about this kind of stuff. This is where it is now. This is not taking into account strength of schedule for the upcoming tournament. This is not taking into account what I think the meta is. This is not taking, because I don't know what the meta is. I don't know what their strength of schedules are because it's very hard to look at. And this is more just a look at the teams and my personal interpretation of where they've gone, where they've improved, or what the differences that we're seeing from the preseason power rankings. That's why I was adjusting as it goes. So I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm an idiot. Because that's probably a lot of you, okay? Oh my God, San Francisco Shock is not S tier. Oh my God, Shanghai Dragons is S tier. This is ridiculous. Oh my God, you put Seoul Dynasty in B tier? Profit just makes them A. Let me know. Let me know so then I can roast you guys later. So let me know. Love you all. Peace out. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.